Senator Middleton, thank you for being here with me today. Let's talk Senate Bill 12. It's my understanding it would ban taxpayer-funded lobbying in Texas. Walk me through exactly what that is and what the bill would change.
So taxpayer-funded lobbying is when your local tax dollars are spent to hire Austin lobbyists. I mean, these are lobbyists that live in Austin, they work on Congress Avenue, and frankly, it's used to work against you and against the conservative values that we were elected to put into action. So taxpayer-funded lobbyists have opposed things like border security. They've opposed things like election integrity. They've opposed things like the Women's Privacy Act, which stops men from going into women's restrooms, locker rooms, and showers. And they even use your own tax dollars to hire lobbyists that then lobby against property tax relief and reform. So I always hear, well, why can't we have lower taxes? Or why is this bill not passing? Or why did the property tax relief bill not occur? Well, a lot of the reason why is because your own tax dollars are being used to lobby against property tax relief and reform. And that is fundamentally wrong. That is fundamentally unethical. And it's your dollars being used as a weapon against you and as a blocker to the conservative legislation that we were elected to pass.
So you're saying that, taxpayers can effectively fund, individuals who may disagree, with the individual taxpayer's belief, if I hear you correctly.
Right. This is forced speech, right? So if you don't like what Target stands for, don't shop at Target. You don't have to pay for their lobbyists. If you don't like what Bud Light stands for, don't buy Bud Light. You don't have to pay for their lobbyists. But if you don't like what your local government is lobbying on or against, quit paying your property taxes. And what happens? Someone could take your home or your business. This is forced speech, and it's wrong.
I do want to ask you, voters may say someone votes against you in particular in the Senate district. You are getting paid a salary, an amount per diem. They may say, I didn't vote for him. I don't want to pay his salary. What's the difference between something like that and not paying, taxpayer funded lobbying in your view?
Well, lobbyists are not elected. We're elected officials and we're supposed to represent you directly. And there should not be a taxpayer-funded lobbyist middleman between your local government official, whether that's a school board member, a county commissioner, or a city council member, and your state representative or state senator. Everyone has a local elected official. And if you think about this in reverse, there's 254 counties. There's about 1,200 school districts. There's over 1,000 cities. Well, the state is not hiring a lobbyist to go check in on and make sure that cities, counties, and school districts are following state law and lobbying them. No, we know that's our job as state representatives and state senators to keep up with what's happening. Everybody in local elected office, of course, has their state senator or state representative cell phone available at any time. And I'll tell you, the lobbyists, they live and work in Austin. They don't represent the values of East Texas, for example. All of my in-laws live in Tyler. My wife is from Tyler. I know how conservative East Texas is, and it is not right when your local tax dollars are being used to, for example, go to Texas Association of School Boards that lobbies against kicking men out of women's restrooms, locker rooms, and showers.
How much money are you seeing is actually going towards taxpayer funded lobbying in Texas?
It's about $100 million a year, which is a lot. I mean, that's money that should be spent on core government services, whether that's police or fire or roads. And frankly, they don't have our values or our best interests at heart. If you work for local government, if you're a local elected official or an employee, of course, you have a fiduciary duty to that city, county, or school districts, but these lobbyists don't. If someone pays them a little more, they'll be on the other side of the issue and be against you. And I've seen that happen again and again and again in Austin. And a lot of times, I think they're not being truthful about the positions that they have in the state legislature. There's one group called County Judges and Commissioners Association of Texas. It's a taxpayer-funded lobby group. And they say they represent the more rural counties, right, which would tend to be more conservative. Well, then why are they registered against my bill, the Women's Privacy Act, that stops men from going into little girls' showers and locker rooms. It's not a conservative position.
You mentioned, that group in particular, but just to provide, some additional context, what's like a lobbying group that is receiving money in your view from taxpayers, and how much are they receiving? Just to kind of, paint a clearer picture here.
Right. Well, so some of the big blue counties like Dallas County or Harris County or Travis County or Bexar County, they hire lobbyists directly. So they spend millions of dollars a year to hire a team of contract lobbyists to go to Austin. And frankly, rural Texas is having to compete against that, and they can't, right? Because there are a lot of counties around the state that are small. They could never afford to do that. It's not a good idea if they wanted to, but it's still couldn't afford to do it. And their voice is being drowned out, just like the voice of our constituents is being drowned out by these taxpayer-funded lobbies. So if we ban this practice, red, conservative, rural counties are not going to have to compete against that army of lobbyists that the big blue Democrat left-wing counties have in Austin. So I think it actually evens the playing field and increases the voice of rural Texans. And think about it this way as well, and I've seen this happen in committee many, many times, where we see our constituents in Austin and they're there because they believe in it. They believe in a particular bill. They want to make their voice heard. They've had to take the day off work. They've had to find daycare for their child. They've had to make a sacrifice to be there. They're not paid to be there. And then what I've seen happen again and again is they give their testimony, and right after them, someone that is a taxpayer-funded lobbyist paid with their own tax dollars is against them and lobbies against their position. It's fundamentally wrong, and it drowns out the voice of those who elected us, our constituents, and the voters that really own every district.
What would you say to those who feel as though this bill would silence dissent?
It doesn't. It increases the voice of our local voters. The ultimate form of local control is the individual voter. Additionally, the bill does not ban associations that can provide services to local government. So, I hear this again and again where counties or cities or school districts, they want that bill tracking, they want that legislative analysis, they want training, they want risk pool insurance, these services that these types of groups supply essentially to cities, counties, and school districts. That doesn't require you to register to lobby. None of those associated services that I hear are important to rural counties, rural school districts, and rural cities require you to register to lobby. All this bill does is it prohibits public funds going to those hired gun, taxpayer-funded lobbyists in Austin. And that's what we're getting at, because at the end of the day, taxpayer-funded lobbying funds the deep state. It is the Austin swamp. Taxpayer-funded lobbying is the USAID of Texas. And so what this bill does is it stops that. Your tax dollars don't have to fund the deep state anymore. They don't have to fund the swamp. And we will defund the deep state of Texas if we pass Senate Bill 12, the ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying.
Now, is taxpayer funded lobbying something exclusive to Texas, or do we see this in other states? Do you see it in other states?
It's all over the country, unfortunately. It's where government is lobbying for more government with your tax dollars. And as we know, government never runs out of money because they have the power to tax. So this is something that's across the nation. And if we can get this done, and I'm fighting to get it done, this is the hardest bill every session in the Texas legislature. The ban on taxpayer-funded lobbying is the toughest fight because literally you're defunding the paycheck of Congress Avenue lobbyists, and they show up in force in the Texas Capitol. They fill the halls, they fill offices, they're calling people constantly right and left and working the building to try to defeat this bill in order to protect their taxpayer-funded paycheck.
Do you see any, more conservative lobbyists though that would be impacted, by this bill?
So those are the private lobbyists. What we're talking about is what happens with your tax dollars. People can choose to do whatever they want with their own money. They can. What we're saying is, well, you don't have a choice. Your tax dollars are going to a lobbyist that you don't get a say in. And that's the problem with taxpayer-funded lobbying, is it's forced speech by our constituents and our taxpayers.